Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Deeper with Sophie Josephina. And today I am joined by Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Sophie. How are you?
I'm doing really good. And I've actually been wanting to interview Mike for a very, very long time. I remember seeing his content way before I started this business and just thinking, wow, I want to be like Mike one day.
Shucks.
And
Well, I'm
so
glad we could
Mike
make it happen.
So Mike is a men's coach and author and an avid stonefruit eater, which I actually don't know what that is. It's just the first thing I'm going to ask him. Mike works with everyday men in building legendary relationships with themselves, their partners, and their world. So yay. Hi, Mike.
Hello. Stone fruit. Yeah. So
Yeah,
maybe it's
what's
more
that?
a colloquial collective term. It's peaches, nectarines, plums, apricots. Yeah. You know,
Right. Whenever I
look,
see
it's a
that
big
in
part
your
of my life.
whenever I see that in your bio, I always thought like, is this like a way to does this have something to do with like appreciating women? I'm not really
Yeah.
sure.
Is this some really, really niche joke that you should be getting? No.
No.
No, and look, it's part of my personality. I tend to talk about that stuff, certainly when it's stone fruit season. But yeah, I don't think it's a term that's necessarily used as a collective, like in the US. A
Mhm.
lot of people will be like, "Well, what do you mean by this? Is it a kind of fruit?" I'm like, it's a family of fruit that I'm very fond of.
I like it. It's amazing. I've been wondering for ages what the stone fruit was about. So it's really about fruit.
There you go. It is
Yeah.
100%.
So Mike, for people who don't know you yet, what is maybe briefly like your story and what have you been building in the world lately?
Yeah. So my story, ooh, where to go? Yeah, I mean, we chatted very, very briefly off here, kind of starting into it. And I suppose my story is, I don't know, maybe like everyone, it's a long evolving one of me as a person, me as a man, and and then another part, me as a coach, and all the other roles. um I was one of those dudes who was a very curious kid, but very safe and liked stability and liked things to be known and certain. I moved around a lot as a kid, and it created a bit of instability in
Hmm.
me, and I simply kind of became uh, the dude that liked things to be pretty controlled and known. And so I became quite a stubborn little dude who would argue and stick to his very safe zone and so on. And so that, like, the reason I say that is because it became a big part of kind of who I was through my adolescent years, and heading into university and out the other side. I did a physical education degree, and at the end of that, this is back in the early 2000s in New Zealand, where um, not just anyone would go and be a personal trainer. Like, you did a degree. I was at university for 5 years, and then I was like, the body's pretty interesting. Why don't I get into become a personal trainer? And so essentially from that day, I've worked for myself. But what I soon found was, oh, I'm working with human behavior. I'm trying to get people to change their
Hmm.
behaviors. I didn't learn so much about this. This is different. But what that kind of led me into for the next 10 or so years, in that line of work, was slowly evolving my process, just through curiosity, and like, how do I fix this problem that this person is presenting with? How do I work with what this person's kind of coming to me for? And most of the time it was me, and it was kind of in a corporate environment, and they were typically wanting something physical, and I soon tapped into the idea that there's something beneath this, mentally and emotionally. And so come around 2012 or so is when I really started to explore myself. I was doing a lot of work on myself,
Mhm.
but also really starting to look at, like, what do I do? What do I want to do? What do I give a shit about? Really starting to ask a lot of self-reflective questions. And it's when I really looked at, like, I've been working with the same kind of dude, all the time. And mentally, he's not where he wants to be. Physically, he's not. But that's the thing that he allows himself a little bit of work on, perhaps. I can work on the
Hmm.
physical. And I was very aware that there was always this kind of emotional drive beneath it. So I just started to, crawl down that rabbit hole and look. And what I started to see was quite alarming. Like, fuck, as me. I was in Australia at the time, which is where everything was fairly similar through most of the Western world, from what I could see. You know, rates of mental health, suicide, loneliness, disconnection, all this stuff. I was like, this something's going on here. And so that started to really make me look at what is going on with men. I started to see this kind of disconnection from even knowing who and what we're supposed to be. and kind of more present, a lot of men, myself included, my clients and conversations I was having, have been living a life of this idea of who we think we're supposed to be. And so I kind of started breaking that down and really exploring like, oh, we are lost to ourselves a little bit. And so that's kind of really what took me into the work, specifically with working with men and, in a quick and short sense, helping men get their shit together.
So beautiful. Yeah, I really resonate with that so many men are living the lives they should. And really crumbling under that pressure.
To live the life of what they should. And there's always this disconnect and this like internal battle and wrestle. And, it's hard, right? And, I have been that guy. I'm always going to be recovering that guy, right? A lot of the stuff that I create and write about is kind of for Mike of 23, 24 and younger,
Yeah, what did we need to hear at the time? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So there was like I was listening to you and you were saying that you used to be the stubborn dude.
Mm-hmm. And so that was a big part of my my own work, was like, I'm in my head a lot. I'm terrified of rejection and things that are different from what I can control. And so, when I kind of started to really explore, like, what am I doing in the world? That was the big kind of block that was still there. But what I am doing is safe and known. And so, a big part of my own work was to kind of get past, like myself, essentially, get out of my own goddamn way.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I know as a woman, or as the feminine, or whatever you want to call it, I've also like dated, I call this a detached intellectual, just a dude that's very much in his head and trying to understand it all and analyze it all. And also with your emotions, and it would drive me nuts. And I would just get bigger and bigger and louder because I actually wanted him to feel stuff. And it wasn't happening. I wanted to see that I affected him somewhat, that there was something in him that got moved. And so it would just make me bigger and bigger, and not to bypass that behavior also can be toxic at times. But it was such an interesting dynamic, because I think we live in a world where that type of behavior in men is very much seen as a healthy, the right behavior, right? It's very much like the intellectual.
He's on an even keel.
Respected. Yeah.
Right. It's that kind of, I don't move very far. The needle never moves very far. And I think, one of the, there's so many, pieces of messaging and conditioning and all that stuff, but there's also this idea, I think, that we've perpetuated in men that, like, it's cool not to care.
Yeah.
And that's where that kind of often comes in, often coincided with the fact that, we learn that we shouldn't feel emotions or express them and anything like that. And so you kind of just sit in your head, in your existence, going, well, I need to not react to that, and you switch off and become number and number. And even though you are a human, right? We are humans, and there is feeling and experience and all that stuff in there. Anything that you don't work or bring into the light will sit in the darkness and atrophy, and it gets weaker and weaker. And the amount of men that I speak to who will say words to the effect of, it's like I can't even really feel anything.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing really for me. How do I even feel? It's just so foreign because it's been, stuck in a corner of a closet for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. So I also have a lot of men in my courses that say this, like, I want to feel, my woman wants me to feel, I want to feel, I don't really feel a lot. What do you say to them?
I mean, first of all, okay, cool. Well, let's maybe look at, what sits around that for him, right? Again, like if he's coming and saying, I want to feel, that's a different sign to like, I don't really feel anything and this is who I am, so we might have to approach those things differently. But then the other thing I think that's very important, regardless of what we're talking about, but especially with men, because we tend to sit in that place of like the expectation that I need to be superhuman, forgetting that humans, right? A superhuman, you would maybe think means like more of human. That means more feeling. But sadly, it doesn't lead that way, right? Superhuman kind of means an unemotional robot. It often leads to having incredibly high expectations. So first of all, we're going to start really small. So simply every day we're going to start a practice of you sitting down and attempting to connect into your experience and what you're feeling mentally, what you're feeling emotionally, and what you're feeling physically. And then, think about like learning a new language, because that's fundamentally what we're doing a lot of the time for guys. We've got a very stunted emotional vocabulary, and what we're doing is we're going to slowly build it up and speak a new language. You can't learn a new language overnight most of the time. So, have some patience and grace with yourself, and, we'll kind of step into this, but it's going to potentially feel uncomfortable. It might feel clunky. It might feel like incredibly frustrating now that you open your eyes to some things, but you don't have the tools and the know-how and all that stuff. And so let's practice a bit of, patience with that, and know that some of that process is probably going to suck.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Some of it's going to suck. Yeah. So this is something I try to teach the women that I work with, is that I think we're so impatient. We're so critical of men, right? Like, we want him to be super present, and the moment he's not, we're super upset that he isn't. And there's such little leeway for the humanness of our men, right? And I was like, wow, it's so, like, just imagine being a guy and like having done your shit and read the books and going to a woman and like noticing that she's just waiting for the moment you're going to fuck up, and the moment you fuck up, you're also done. That's rough. That's rough.
Yeah, well, it brings in this whole other, I think, like, set of expectations and almost confusion, right? To like what we might have been brought up with, learning about, be strong and stoic and all this kind of shit. And then it's like, hey, but now we need you to be this totally other thing. It's like, what? But I'm just still trying to figure this shit out over here. And what is that even? And it's foreign to me, and I'm trying. And, like, let's really get to something. And I know you'll be so across this, and I imagine you've helped a lot of women with this, but most men want to, especially in a heteronormative relationship setting, we want to show up and we want you to be happy and healthy and safe. That's what we want. Unfortunately, a lot of our old shit and our own shit gets in the way, and maybe it doesn't look so great. Sometimes it looks fucking horrible, but that's primarily what is at the base of our intentions.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happens
when you cut that down, like you say?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you cut that down like that, and it if he's standing on a rug, it kind of grabs it and pulls it out from under him, right? And that can be where the little boy in him comes out and he feels defeated, and he might fight, right? Get defensive and fight back in some, way, shape, or form. For some people, obviously, there's the physical way. Others, it's barbs and whatever, and then others, it's flee, right? Fight or flight when we go into that. I am being threatened response, and that's often the response. And so potentially it's stonewalling and being dismissive. Maybe it's just disappearing, and like, you're not here, right? I can see you, but you're not here. So it could be any things, but I think the simple answer is probably, it's not going to be the most amazing response, right?
Yeah.
It's not your job to build him up, but in terms of a partnership, you get to pump his tires, because definitely that's what he wants to do for you too. Again, it might not be that effective from time to time, whatever, perhaps the equivalent of cutting him down is.
I love this, that it's not your job to pump his tire, but you get to build him up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what a partnership is, right?
Yeah.
If I need my wife to do something, is very different to I want to and she wants to, and vice versa.
Yeah. So what if he is shutting down? Like, I've been wondering this in my personal life as well. Like, what is it that I, as the partner to somebody or to a man that's shutting down, what can I do then? Because there's, of course, a part of me that just wants to be like, oh, fuck, you're not here again, you shut down. Again, very dismissive, right? Again, there's this whole narrative of like, men are only allowed to do an A-, and anything underneath A-, we reject them. But like, so what can I actually do in that moment? What does he need?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, it might differ, right, for the guy, and maybe the dynamic, like if her response is to potentially step into that masculine space, it was like, fuck, you're not showing up, so I'll do it, right? Then that's probably going to be something that challenges, and again, might come to that, two options. He might try and fight against that and butt heads, or he might lean away from it and just be, a floppy wet rag, let's say. So I think, to what we are potentially hoping that he will do is kind of step into some masculine energy, right? And so either way, like, step forward and lead and show up. And so I think in a simple sense, it requires that polarity, right? So the invitation and potentially the softening. And what is going to invite him forward? I think the thing is always an invitation forward, like telling him to do something or whatever. It's not necessarily going to work that well. So, like, the invitation could look like many different things, perhaps depending on the relationship and the context. But, if I speak to my own example, right, like the thing always in my relationship that will invite me forward, regardless of potentially what's going on, is when my wife invites and from a soft and receptive place.
Oh yeah.
Because it's inviting.
Yeah.
Right. And in that, maybe like the masculine loves to be appreciated, has his tires pumped, right? And so I think it can be a pretty effective caveat, if genuine, way to go about it, in terms of, coming in and particularly, oh shit, maybe I did something that wasn't quite on there, so owning that and then saying, look, I appreciate when you XYZ, right? Maybe if it's relevant to what you're talking about, but that level of like being seen and appreciated with the invitation that's receptive, I think it's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that he might not, of course, right? But you can never know what someone's going to do, and if we're going to choose, we have to be willing that they won't. But that's where I would go with that.
Yeah, I love that, the softening. There's something you did a post recently, which was
because also you spoke about the language, which is cutting. Right.
Yes.
And so I think that language is really important, like cutting them down, right? It kind of requires that softening. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Sorry, where you go.
So you did a post recently about fake positivity is negative as fuck. And I love that, because I think one of my big pet peeves with men is maybe the love and light guy, or the a little bit also the stubborn type we were talking about earlier, but just everything's always positive. Everything, nothing's a big deal, nothing really hurts, like everything is just positive. And it again is another thing that I noticed in my previous relationship, which just make me bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes.
So can you tell me a bit more about why is fake positivity negative as fuck?
Yeah. Well, like you're potentially just putting your head in the sand and ignoring important shit that we need to face. Like we've sold this idea of, be positive and see the positive, and affirmations, and like silver, every cloud's got a silver lining and all this kind of stuff. And of course these things are very valid, and just sitting and dwelling in like negativity and shit is potentially the other end. But like a human experience is messy, and there's a spectrum of emotions and experiences, and so to attempt to either live all positive or at least appear all positive is self-denial, self-deception, and quite likely, manipulation or attempted manipulation of others. Like, what the fuck is that? That's not positive, right? And so, as humans often, and I do find it a lot in men, in terms of the masculine, liking to be quite black and white and, very detailed. And so we can tend to go to the kind of all or nothing in a spectrum, right? Like the nice guy, if I'm not nice, I have to be an asshole. Like, no, if I'm not being positive, that means I'm being negative. No, can potentially just open the door for nuance and humanity. So I think, as you said, right, there's the potentially the need to see the positive in absolutely everything. And I often think of, and this might be very obscure, hopefully someone listening will get it, but there's the scene in the Monty Python movie, I'm pretty sure it's the Holy Grail. And it's the Black Knight when he gets his arm lopped off, right, by the sword, and he's got blood pouring out, and he says, what does he say? He says, it's just a scratch, then the next arm, it's a flesh wound. It's like, you're fucking bleeding out, dude. But this positivity right now is not helping you. You are bleeding to death. Like instantly, I always think of that example, right, to the point where he's just a torso on the ground, still, I'm fine, I can fight on. It's like, no, you're about to die. Right. And so sometimes different examples in our lives, maybe we're glossing over stuff for the need to feel and create a sense of positivity that we actually really need to look at. It's really important for us to potentially move to a more positive stage at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard a lot of men speak that they, for instance, they will break up with a woman because they don't want to hurt her anymore. I think this speaks so much to that. I think a lot of men feel very responsible for all the pain that is happening. And so everything just has to stay nice. And I think a lot of guys forget, or at least the way I experience myself and my girlfriends, is that we're actually very capable of being uncomfortable and in pain. Like we literally bleed every month. We bring children into the world. Like our body's actually made to be quite uncomfortable. Our systems are made to kind of move through that. And I think like this is one of the things, like I've always hated it when guys decided that for me, of like, but I don't want to hurt you anymore. It's like, but I decide that. And so what does it actually say how uncomfortable I think a lot of men are with other people's discomfort, with other people's
Yes,
pain.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think often, kind of dragging along on the coattails of that is I'm wildly uncomfortable with my own pain.
Yeah.
And so I certainly don't want to sit with someone else's.
Yeah.
And so also, if I feel like I'm responsible for your pain, then what does that create in me? Guilt, et cetera, aka pain. So I'm going to try and, make your mind up for you, right? Which is ludicrous when you use that language. I'm
So
deciding that you can't handle this, so I'm gonna make the decision.
yeah. Yeah.
It's
There's
also
something
not
very
taking
unequal.
responsibility for your own shit. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to hurt you anymore. And there's so many different examples of that kind of stuff, right? Whereas
Yeah.
maybe it's just like, you know what? I'm going to own my shit right now. I don't want you to hurt, but I understand that you may,
Yeah.
right? Because I can't control anyone else's feelings. I can certainly influence them, and I can have a conversation to that, but I can't try and control them and manage them because, I mean, it's futile and disrespectful, really.
Yeah, because it sounds nice, but I know being on the receiving end of that, I'm always like, oh, what the hell? We're two adults. Why am I being coddled?
Yeah. And look, I
Right?
think that's probably a really valid kind of response. I can manage my feelings. Can you, perhaps speak what's really true for you in this
For
situation?
you. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that's an invitation which might like create a little bit of panic behind the eyes. Right. But, these kinds of invitations can happen in many settings, I think. Right.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I can manage my feelings. I appreciate that. But
Yeah.
if you didn't have to do it for that reason, what would the reason be?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you speak into the difference between nice guys and good men? Because I loved what you said, that like men are very binary. So like, okay, so now nice guys is not cool anymore. So what's the other thing then? Is it being an asshole? And like there's something in between those two. So could you speak a little bit into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is, right? And there's so much between it, like there's an ocean between that. And that's where I think, one example, as I said before, where a lot of guys who fall into the quote unquote nice guy category, who, are a walkover, who say yes to everything, who are people pleasers, who avoid conflict, who, do things for others, but there's always this condition or set of conditions around it, which is, I need you to see me as a good, nice guy. Look at me, aren't I helpful? Don't I go out of my way and self-sacrifice? And I need you to like me and approve of me. And so that's subtle manipulation, right? I'm often trying to manage your perception of me, similar to the example that we were sharing before. That's not nice. And so a lot of guys who fall into that place, and I'll put my hand up as a recovering nice guy, struggle with the idea of any other set of behaviors because they think that the alternative is the opposite. I need to be an asshole, as you said, which is ludicrous, of course. But it makes sense when you perhaps connect into this guy's experience and his life experience and where he's coming from, and the fact that he's wildly insecure, and that's why he does all that stuff. He is looking for the world to affirm him. And so the idea of doing something different where there is a risk that I could not only not have a, or I could not be liked and not be accepted, and then that would potentially prove all of my deepest fears true, that is like, foundation in identity shattering. And so it's easy to look at something different and go, what, I have to be an asshole? No way. Thank you. I'm not going to be an asshole. So I'll stick with this because it's comfortable in what I know and I can keep justifying it. So, any of that stuff, again, is I attempt to give that breadth of it to hopefully, convey some understanding to that dude, right? Because it's a shame that it doesn't work either. But yeah, the simple point was this: nice guys aren't good men. Nice guys, quote unquote, right? They're the men that are actioning that set of general kind of behaviors from a foundation of low self-worth and immense insecurity. And so, what's a good man? A good man, I think, is many things, but in a simple sense, he is nice for the sake of it, not to get something in return. He's nice because he cares. And I'll also extend this out that most guys who would resonate with, fuck, I'm a nice guy, they are nice guys, genuinely good men most of the
Mhm.
time, but there's this element, will be different for everyone, that is coming from that intention
Mhm.
that I just discussed. And so like one of the simple strategies is to drop the expectation, to drop the transaction, right? And what you need from others, and simply be a good dude. Right. And so I think it looks like a lot of things, he is externally focused in terms of he gives and is nice for the sake of it, but he's internally focused in the sense of that he creates his own security, that he comes from a place of self-respect. And so he has that kind of giving and caring energy as opposed to that kind of needy and taking energy. Yeah, I think there's a lot of differences, but some pretty simple ones come down to, one is far more insecure and it manifests in his behaviors, and one is secure in himself and that manifests in his behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Whenever I've been on the other side of a nice guy, it's always felt like fear dressed up as love. And it would just feel icky to receive. I would just feel like, oh, you're doing something nice, but I don't want it. I don't know why, but I don't want it. Right. I would
Yeah,
have a
because it comes
visceral
with a
response
condition.
of, yeah.
Yeah, it's that kind of covert contract. And look, another thing that I've spoken about this a lot, but I don't tend to maybe I just forget this. But something that also might resonate for a lot of guys in that space is that, you use the word receive, right? Like receiving from a nice guy. Hopefully, if we can see it. Like, by the way, nice guys, people who can see, can fucking see what's going on. Is that nice guys also struggle to receive, right? Because they think, because I put, even though I might not be super conscious of it, I put conditions on everything. Is there conditions on this? Do I have to do something here? And this is where we often build this kind of transactional living, and there can be a lot of resentment, giving what I expect from them and all that kind of stuff, right? They keep giving to me, and so am I in their debt? I mean, what a total mindfuck.
Yeah.
Simply, right? But the struggling to receive is pretty common. And one of the things that I encourage a lot of guys to do is, in a really simple like litmus test throughout your life, like I think this can speak to a lot of things, is explore how you go in regards to compliments. When given a compliment, can you take it? Can you receive it? Do you get awkward? Do you dismiss it? Do you feel like you need to give one back? Like, it's not necessarily anything to overanalyze. Simply notice, can I receive that thing?
Yeah.
And if you do feel awkward, my invitation to start with is, regardless of what's going on internally for you, take a breath and say thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I love that one. Me and my partner play around with whenever one of us says I love you, to not right away say I love you too, because that's actually like ping ponging it back right away, but to actually take a breath, and maybe the response is, yeah, I feel really loved. Maybe that's the actual response. I love you. It's like, yeah, fuck, I do feel really loved by you. That's a very different energy than I love you too, because you're just bouncing it back when you say like, oh, you did really well in that presentation. You right away say, oh, you're great at your job too. It doesn't feel like anything's received. It just feels like it's ping pong
exactly.
back.
Yeah. Did we both receive those things, or did we both put them somewhere else over there? In another cupboard.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. This is such a beautiful conversation. So, I'm just going to read a quote because I loved what you wrote there. Men, the more you wait for your partner to show up for you, reassure you, acknowledge you, soothe you, so that you can show up for her fully, so you can show up for her, the less likely she is to do so in the way you want, and you will both miss out. Leading means going first. So this is very much about, like, I think some men can very much be waiting for their partner to make them feel good about themselves.
Yeah, right. Kind of that pump the tires thing, right? Like, she doesn't appreciate me. Okay, well, are you showing up first and foremost?
Yeah.
Right. And not showing up in a way that's really, like, I go to work and I provide, right? And I work really hard. So, okay, well, yeah. But like, have you had a conversation about your intentions for why you work, because you want to provide for your family, or whatever the situation is, right? And so if you're sitting there and hoping that, I need her to love me and appreciate me and show up for me so that I can do it for her, then you're waiting for her to lead you.
Yeah.
And that's a codependent, like, needy energy. And so you could look at that and go, well, why do I have to lead it? It's like, fuck, you don't have to. But do you want to have a partnership where your partner, like, wants to follow and adore you? That's up to you. And so, yeah, do that, as I said in that quote, what happens is we both miss out.
Yeah.
Yeah, or that maybe it's back to one of those examples earlier with the cutting down and potentially her going into her masculine because he's not showing up. Maybe then the risk is you get into a relationship where your partner, gentleman, is in her masculine because she's felt the need that she has to because you won't.
Yeah.
And so, by the law of polarity, you're going to sit in that softer, really ineffective feminine place.
Yeah.
And again, that might be the relationship that you want. So fill your boots. Mm-hmm. But if it's not, it's something to look at.
Yeah. What about, I actually really love this topic, but what about when men do find their partners a lot? Like when I've given several examples where I would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. I know that for a lot of dudes, that's a lot to receive, right? Her emotionality, her chaoticness, her up and down. I know I can be completely in bliss 1 hour, completely depressed the other. Like it's very much the feminine being, I think. I know that actually for a lot of guys, that is a lot to handle, right? And I think we kind of expect them to be able to do that. But I think for a lot of men, that's intimidating almost.
Yeah, and again, especially because I think in a simple relativity, standpoint, as you said, right, like earlier, the dude who is the even keel, relative to me, that's so foreign. I can't even understand that experience because I hardly ever come off the center line, right? Yeah, so it's foreign and unknown, and that alone, speaks to many examples, is often going to speak to the challenge. So then what's happening, when we reach that edge of the unknown, regardless of the context, is, the safety mechanism fires off, right? Like I don't know how to do this, right? And so potentially we go into that, like, fuck this, you're crazy, that fight, right? Or flight, like, I'm just going to lean away from this or dismiss or go away, or like, I'm just going to give you the space, but not effective space, like I'm running away space, right? Because that's that little boy, potentially that little boy energy kicking in where I don't know what to do here. And regardless of whether it's purposeful or not as a test, the feminine is like a wave testing the rock. And so, the simple question, I suppose, is, can you stand?
Yeah.
And be okay in that, and not have to fix it, and not have to manage her process and her emotions and her experience, and simply be with it. And if need be, say, hey, you know what? For my own sanity and emotional process right now, I need to create some space. Is that okay with you? Yeah. Like, have the conversation. And so the practice really is being able to sit and to stand, and not necessarily like literally, maybe metaphorically, but also, literally as well. And if it's so foreign, first and foremost, first of all, ask yourself, because I think what a lot of guys in that example that you're speaking to will do is, it's something I've done. This is something about me right now.
Right.
What have I done? Therefore, what do I need to do to manage it? Right. If the levels are up and down here, what do I need to do to bring it back where it's comfortable and manageable for me? Right. And so it becomes this thing about me, which again, like, fuck, what? And I say that as the dude who's done it and probably still does it. But hopefully to get a bit of understanding there too. Right. And so if it's super foreign, like the emotional literacy piece before, you got to put the training wheels on and slowly improve and become more capable. And so that's going to require a bit of patience and grace with yourself, and potentially asking for that from your partner.
Yeah, I love that.
Like, I don't know how to navigate those highs and lows of yours at the moment. Could you tell me how that would look for you? Because that's what I want to do.
To hear. Yeah.
Right. And you see how that's not necessarily trying to fix or solve anything, but it's also saying, and by the way, fellas, a very simple one, like, how can I solve and support, not solve, how can I support you or show up for you right now? Right. And then to the ladies, what I would say is, like, sometimes you're like, I want you to know how to do that. But again, if he doesn't know any way, shape or form right now, then hoping he will guess is setting you both up for failure. And so again, back to my earlier point, we want to. We want you to be safe and have your experience and feel happy and loved. And so sometimes tell us this and that, and the next thing, I can do that.
Yeah.
I want to do that. Yeah. But maybe if you look at my last 35 years, I've never learned how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have terrible PMS. It's really, really bad. And the way my partner deals with that is not by like coddling me and sitting next to me like, what do you need? Do you want chocolate? Do you need? Because if he does that, I will chew his face off. It's also not by avoiding me and not being in the room or judging and be like, fuck, you're crazy today. It's also not that. He has this very beautiful thing where he's just in the room doing his own thing. And that's truly all I need, that I know that if I do want to have a cuddle or just want to cry or watch a sad movie together or eat together, whatever, I can just go and sit on the couch with him and he's there. And there's a conversation I can start, but I don't need to. And he's also not calling. So it's actually that simple. It's actually that simple. It's just kind of be in the same space. That's often more than enough.
Yeah, and like I'm assuming, right, that kind of thing will be different for everyone, and so that's why like have the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah, less guesswork, more like conversations.
Yeah, I love that. And also I love what you said, like speaking about I don't really know what to do for you right now. How can I support you? I love that. I love, because a lot of men are like, I don't know what to say to her. Literally say that. I don't really know what to say to you. I don't know what.
Yeah, so saying nothing isn't the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even sometimes like what I will say to my partner is like, I'm going to give you space now, which is maybe a different way of saying I'm not going to talk to you right now. I don't know what to say to you right now, right? Yeah. But at least I'm communicating what I'm doing and the intention behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not disappearing, like you said, right? It's not that like leaving. It's like, this is what I'm choosing to do. I can come back to the space, or you can come to it. If you want me to come, let me know. Otherwise, I'll wait for you to come to me.
Yeah, I love that. That feels way more, because I think there's a level sometimes of not being transparent about what's going on that makes the other very insecure. I know that gives me feelings of insecurity when he just shuts down and leaves the room and I have no idea what's going on. And just indeed the simple sentence like, I'm gonna just give you some space, and if you need me, I'm in the other room. That's already
because I suppose there's a reality where and I suppose there's a reality where the response to like I don't know how to support you right now. How can I? It's like, I don't know what I want right now, right? I just don't, okay. So again, like next challenge, cool. So what do I do here? Well, probably don't go, oh, fuck, if you don't know that I don't know, or something like. Think about some compassion and some empathy. Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to give you a bit of space until you can work that out, and just know that I'm here if you need me. Like that's fucking simple.
Yeah. Maybe my last question is, what are like? I think it's really important for men to understand what is actually wounded feminine or over the top feminine, or things that are just not okay, because I think a lot of men just think like, okay, she's like chaotic and all over the place, and I need to be able to handle that, or otherwise communicate that I can't. But like, what is actually the boundary? Because I think that's something a lot of men are really I can hear that a lot of men are really struggling. Like, where do I give her boundaries? What are the boundaries that are allowed? Where is it that I just need to be able to handle emotions better? And what is like a no-go?
Yeah, and I like, it's a great question, right? And I think for me, this speaks to something that I would broaden out, like that example of, like what is not okay, and what has gone beyond like some, let's say natural and healthy feminine to something that's more wounded and ineffective, is, well, maybe trying to figure out where the line is in the midst of that storm is going to be quite challenging. So can you give perhaps both of you the rope that if you happen to be in that for the first time and you haven't figured this out yet, maybe this isn't going to be the moment, maybe we figure it out. Right? Because when we get into conflict, we're not necessarily the most effective at handling conflict. So have this conversation. Hey, you know what? When there's love and partnership and connectivity, sometimes when we get into conflict and, I see this, like sometimes emotional highs and lows from you, and I often don't know how to respond, or where I just stand and accept and allow you to flow and whatever. or where something isn't acceptable, and where I draw the line. Maybe my history would have said the line is way fucking earlier, and I'm learning that there's more rope there, but I really don't know sometimes. So could you support me in what do you think is where you're in a good place and where it's perhaps gone ineffective? And like have that conversation. It might be a series of conversations. And because one of the things that for me that speaks to is communicate about your communication when you're able to communicate about it. And so my wife and I will have those conversations when we're not in the storm, because it's fucking wildly ineffective and like, oh man, difficult to try and do it in the eye of the storm. And so and I think one of the points there is the boundary and the line, etc., will potentially differ from time to time. And so one of the things that the way I look at it is, one of the things that we can create in those kinds of conversations is, the tools and the strategies and the indicators and what we use. And so, like one of the things that my wife and I use is like a safe word. I say, when I think the boundaries hit, I'm like, pineapples. And that's like, this isn't working. I need you to look at some shit. I'm going to give you some space right now. But at least that's the state changer, and because at the same time, I might be in a different place, not the most effective place to tune into line, boundary, like maybe I'm working, maybe I've got the baby, like whatever it is, right? And so arming ourselves outside of those situations is what allows us to be hopefully more skilled and more effective in them. But what this comes back to for me is partnership. Like, can we as partners work together on this so that when these things happen, whatever they are, but given that example, we can both navigate them more effectively. I have tools to perhaps, ground you a little bit or pull you back to the situation or whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that. It's really this, like, can we partner in each other's nervous system rather than defend ourselves from what you may or may not be doing? And that's a very different energy.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I see you. I know what your buttons are. You know what my buttons are. Like, I want to partner in that and also respect my own humanness. And yeah, I love that. Okay, super, super final question. What do you love about the feminine?
Where do I start? Where do I stop? No, I think maybe this speaks to me in one of the answers before, but like I find more attractive than anything in my wife, which is my most common representation of, I suppose, is softness. Is like when she softens and melts and like receives. For me, that is like absolutely the most appealing and most amazing thing. There's obviously a lot in there potentially, but that for me is it.
Beautiful. I love that. Gorgeous question. If people want to hear or learn more about you, where can they go, Mike?
Yeah, so Mike Campbell is me. It's a somewhat of a common name, so I don't tend to own that in Google. But yeah, come and find me on Instagram. Mike Campbell MC is me, and all around the internet. Instagram is a good place to come and hang out and say hi if you want. Happy to receive messages and questions and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for today, Mike. I really, really, really appreciate you. This is beautiful.
Thanks for having me. It was wonderful to chat. Appreciate it.